I had a fantastic week last week. I had the opportunity to travel to 2 different cities to talk to 2 different organizations in 2 different industries about the same subject. And that subject was about interviewing and hiring. And in my experience, what I have seen when trainers or employment lawyers or HR professionals go in and talk to organizations about the interviewing and hiring process, far too often they start at the interview itself, which misses a meaningfully significant piece that has to happen before you sit down and meet with even the first candidate whom you're going to interview. When I conduct interview trainings, I generally split it up into 3 different sections, which I call, creatively enough, pre-interview, interview, and post-interview. What I want to focus on today are 3 steps that we have to take pre-interview to ensure that the process goes as effectively as it can with the overarching goal of hiring the best person for that position. Step 1 that we must take in advance of even creating a posting, internal or external, a requisition, internal or external, and that is making sure that our job descriptions do in fact reflect what it is this person is going to be doing day in and day out. And there are 2 important benefits from updating this job description. Benefit number 1, practically, one of the questions, of course, we are going to want to ask during the course of the interview is, can you perform the essential functions of the job? Please don't ask it like that. You sound like a lawyer. That's not how normal human beings talk. You're going to go through each and every one of those functions. And from where can you easily derive those functions? From the job description that recently has been updated to accurately reflect what it is the person's going to be doing day in and day out. A second benefit, and a more legally focused benefit, is, let's assume for the sake of argument, poo, knock on wood, this should never happen to you, the Department of Labor comes a-knocking on an audit based on a complaint that someone who you considered and classified to be exempt is now contending that they are non-exempt and therefore eligible for overtime. One of the first documents the Department of Labor is going to ask for in these circumstances, which again, we hope will never happen to you, is the job description for that person. We want to make sure that this job description, which again must meaningfully and accurately reflect what the person's going to be doing, contains the bells and whistles that are necessary for that person to be considered exempt. For example, if you are going to consider this person exempt and classify the person as such under the administrative exemption of the Fair Labor Standards Act, we want to make sure that the language in the job description shows that this person does in fact exercise discretion and independent judgment with regard to matters of major significance within your organization. Now, if it says all of that, does that mean the Department of Labor will say, peace out, you're good? No. The job description is not dispositive in and of itself, but it can provide meaningful benefits practically and legally. And just so we're clear, updating the job description, leaders, please hear me on this. This is your job. HR is there to tie a bow around it. Counsel certainly is there to ensure legal niceties and that it is compliant, but you're the person who understands what the person's going to be doing day in and day out. HR doesn't appreciate that with the nuance that you do. It is your job, leaders, managers, supervisors, to ensure that the job description is updated and does, in fact, accurately represent what the person's going to be doing day in and day out. Number 2, we want to make sure that we have created a uniform list of job-related questions. This is the set of questions that each and every candidate who comes before the interviewer or the interviewers will be asked. Now, question that comes up all the time is, are these the only questions that should be asked? The answer to which, of course, is no. Because if your interview goes something along the lines of predetermined question, answer, predetermined question, answer, predetermined question, answer, what it looks like you're doing is not listening. Because you've already got the script in your head. We've all been in really effective interviews. And really effective interviews involve the interviewee talking an awful lot and the interviewer talking very little. Why? Because we as the interviewer, well, we know all about us, and we don't need to learn more about us. We want to get the information from the person who is sitting across from us in person, virtually. I once saw an interview with Larry King. And Larry King was considered for quite some time to be one of the better interviewers on television. And during the course of this interview, Larry King was actually the person being interviewed. And they asked him, "What do you do to prepare for the interview?" And the answer he gave I thought was pretty interesting. And what he said was, "I do as little as possible without making myself look foolish." And I didn't really understand what he meant by that, and apparently neither did the interviewer, because the interviewer's follow-up question was, "What do you mean?" And Larry King explained that if he over-prepares for an interview, he's not forced to listen to the answers and ask intelligent follow-up questions based on those responses. Am I telling you not to prepare for the interview? No. In fact, that is going to be number 3, and we will get to that. We must prepare for the interview. What I am telling you is crucial, is that we are listening to those answers and asking intelligent follow-up questions based on the responses. The more you are listening intellectually, empathetically, non-competitively, you're not interrupting, you're allowing that person to finish their thought, the more this person thinks you are genuinely interested in what they have to say. You have now sold yourself, and in turn, you have sold the organization. And of course, these uniform lists of job-related questions have benefits. One of the questions, of course, we want to ask during the course of an interview is, can you perform the essential functions of the job? Which, of course, you are never going to ask that way, because that is not how normal people speak. And oh, by the way, the person doesn't know what those essential functions are in any event. But you're going to go down through each of the essential functions. And from where will you derive those essential functions? Not just your job description, but they're also on your uniform list of job-related questions. So number 1, we want to have updated our job descriptions to ensure that they accurately reflect what it is the person's going to do day in and day out. Number 2, we want to have prepared that uniform list of job-related questions, recognizing that they are not the only questions, but they are going to serve as the framework for our interview. Number 3, prepare for the interview. We all understand that, of course, the person who's being considered for the job, the interviewee, needs to do their best to sell themselves to us. But we also appreciate, do we not, that if this is a particularly good candidate, there is a reasonable chance that they have an opportunity to work not just for our organization, but for many others, which means we need to be selling at all times. And one of the most effective ways you can do this, in addition to listening, as I talked about it a moment ago, is really being prepared. Having reviewed all of the material that has been provided to you in advance of the interview, and having intelligent questions based on that information. I will share with you an experience that I actually had, which did the exact opposite of that. I was interviewing for a job back in the late 1990s. It was like 1998, 1999, maybe 2000. And at the time, the market for legal services in Philadelphia was kind of booming, which meant those of us who were junior associates, like I was at the time, we had a fair amount of leverage if we wanted to move, because a lot of firms were looking for associates who had been trained well and were looking to move to another firm. So when I decided to leave the firm for which I had worked, I was fortunate in as much as I had opportunities to interview at a number of other firms. And I will never forget going into this one firm, and I met with a couple of people, and it had gone pretty well. And then I went up for the last interview with a partner in the office, and I will never forget, I walked to the door and I gave a little knock, tapped lightly, respectfully, no response. Knocked a little harder, and his office was down to his desk was down to my left. And I heard some grumble from behind some papers, "Come in," or something along those lines. So I walked over and I stood behind the chair, because if I sit down without being invited and my mom walks by the door, I'm in a lot of trouble. He never invites me to sit down. So after about a minute or so, I'm like, okay, fine, I'm just going to sit down. And he spends the next 3 to 5 minutes, which I will tell you to me felt like the next 3 to 5 hours, going through my resume, going through my application, going through my transcript and my writing sample documents that I know he had for weeks. And I remember sitting there in that moment thinking, and maybe it was because my ego was completely out of control, but I remember in that moment thinking, you need me more than I need you. There are plenty of other firms that are looking for people who are just like me, and I'm trying to figure out where it is that I fit best. And what you've just said to me is you don't care. Because I remember, again, in that moment thinking, if this is how this feels while you're trying to convince me to come work for you, my goodness, what is this going to look like when I actually get here? And I'll never forget it. I left that interview. I stopped at the 7th floor. I went into the recruiting coordinator's office and I withdrew my application. Now, am I the greatest lawyer of all time? No. But what was the very clear message that this partner sent to me in reviewing all of the material I knew he had for weeks the moment I walked in the door? And that is, this wasn't important to him at all. Folks, the pre-interview process is just as important as what happens during the interview itself. We want to ensure, please, that we have updated our job descriptions to make sure that they reflect accurately what it is the person's going to be doing day in and day out. Second, we want to create a uniform list of job-related questions that each and every candidate gets asked during the course of the interview. And finally, we must prepare for that interview so that we are best able to sell ourselves and in turn, sell our organization. Thanks so much once again for listening. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for commenting. Hope to see you all soon.